How you guys doing? This is another episode of Building Wealth and Mental Health. We have a special guest today, Dr. Danielle Norman. She is I think, licensed marriage counselor.
Licensed marriage and family therapist.
Licensed marriage and family therapist. And I think she also has her PsyD, which is going to be unique. This is the first PsyD we've had on this episode. So I would love to get into that experience that you had there. But to start off, please tell me a little bit about what you do and the populations you serve.
So yes, my name is Danielle Norman. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm licensed in the state of California. I also have a doctorate of psychology in marriage and family therapy. So like just basically a doctor of therapy essentially. So like I have a practice, it's all remote. I see clients via telehealth. Most of the clients that I work with are adults, young adults to, middle age and older. I do work with some adolescents, but most of the work that I do is with adults coming with depression, anxiety, stress. Could be some trauma under there. I always try and dig and find a little things that may be unresolved, but it's just your, typical person who feels stuck, who might be having like relationship issues and can't quite figure out like what's going on, and they feel like now is a good time to explore that, and I love doing that with clients.
Gotcha. What is your secret to being able to explore with clients? How are you able to open them up and allow them in to help them, to allow you to help them?
I think I probably use a lot of humor to disarm the situation.
Mhm.
I have always had this like I guess kind of value or principle that starting something like therapy is extremely hard and difficult and scary. So I don't want to be scary. So I try to be very relatable, very personable, like you're just having a chat with like a super chill friend, but I also give you like some little, I call them little nuggets, like little chicken nuggets that, you can take with you to incorporate and, hopefully get to the next stage that you're trying to get to.
I like that. So let's go into your journey on becoming a doctor and becoming psychology and all those different things. So explain, who were you before you were in high school? Explain your environment, your upbringing, some of the things that happened throughout growing up for you.
Well, I'm a preacher's kid. So I grew up in the church. I was at church like 3, 4 times a week growing up. And so that was a big part of like my childhood, was growing up surrounded by people, at church and things like that. I was a little bit of a nerd. I was always like in the gate programs, and so I was like a preacher's kid, the typical one, but I also had like my rebellious side as I got older. But as a young child, I look back at it and I was like, wow, okay, that was pretty cool, because a lot of the friends that I have now, I made as like a young child, and we all have like that same, lived experience of growing up at that church in, Compton, California. Like it was, very, looking back on it, it's a very like nostalgic and nice time to think about. So
Like that. So, because you're a preacher's kid, I have to ask, how are you reconciling, the studies that you went through, which some could cause some people to go the opposite direction, versus your childhood upbringing? Have you reconciled those? Did they were they consistent to your faith base? How do you see your faith versus, what you've studied throughout your college career?
I think that as I've gone through my own like personal spiritual journey, it's kind of helped me to be able to relate to those individuals who might be experiencing the same things, right?
Mhm.
Because as a preacher's kid, you grow up in the church and you have this perception that, oh my gosh, everything is like sparkly and shiny and like Jesus, like it's just like everything's great. And then as you grow older, you start to like have these realizations that cause you to have maybe a crisis of faith, and you really are trying to figure it out. But that's like kind of my role as a therapist, to help you, to guide you to figure out like what answer are you seeking, and how can we help you to find it.
So, when was your first introduction to therapy? Was it as a child? Was it in college? When did you think, hey, this is something people do, and this is actually a service that's needed in society?
Well, I always knew of like pastoral counseling, so I always knew that that was a thing. But in terms of like therapy, my first experience was me going to therapy as a teenager, because I was having a lot of like issues, and my mom was like, "We got to figure something out. You're not talking to me, so let's try and figure out who you can talk to." But as a rebellious teenager, I'm sitting across from this, she was probably a young intern, like I was, will be. And I just gave her the hardest time. I sat across from her and did not say anything. I was like, I don't want to talk to you. So having that personal experience, I really relate a lot to the adolescents who are like, I'm only here because of this, right? I'm not here because I want to be here. And that is the challenge for me to help them figure out what is it, you got to be here, right? For whatever reason. So let's figure out how to make it productive so that you don't feel like this is forced. And I think that experience, I wish I could find her and say sorry.
Yeah, and they're probably, tilted who you serve today because of that experience, right? So let's talk about how you decide which college to go to and your journey as far as your studies, because a lot of times it's not a straight line. I think you have a little bit more dense amount of studies and degrees and doctoral resume than most people I interview. So explain your journey on going to college and getting your doctorate.
Mm-hmm. College was interesting. I always had the dream of my mom's an RN, so I was always surrounded by her like medicine and like what she would talk about. And so even before college, I knew that I wanted to be an MD, like a surgeon. I had even chosen my specialty, cardio thoracic surgery, and that was my path. I was like, I'm going to, apply to UCR, which is Riverside. They have a dual program with UCLA that I would just be able to transfer. I did all the research. I went to the campuses. Did I get in? No. So that was my first kind of like bump, like, oh, wow, okay. But I did end up going to a Cal State, and I majored in, I was pre-med. I was pre-med biology for like 2.5 years. And I don't know if I was not focused. I don't know if like how it came to be, but slowly I just was realizing that I'm not doing as well as I thought I was going to be based on how well I had done in high school. Like, I love science, it's awesome. I got to college and it was not that. Luckily, and I think maybe the spring semester of my sophomore year, I had a critical thinking class. And that was like, I love critical thinking. I'm a very analytical type of person. And I was like, okay, I got to figure something out. So maybe it'll be psychology. Maybe I'll be a psychiatrist. I'll still be a doctor. Um, but as I progressed further and got closer to graduation, I started to learn more and more about just psychology in general. And I still had an idea of maybe I'll take the study for the MCAT and try and go to med school, but I didn't. And I enrolled in a graduate program for marriage and family therapy. I wanted to take some time off, but my mom said no. She said, if you take time off, you're going to just become complacent and you're just going to work a 9 to 5. You have a degree, but you're not going to end up where you really want to be. And she pushed me. I was really mad at her at the time, but I started my master's in marriage and family therapy in 2010. And that program was very transformative. It was like me being in like 2.5 years of my own therapy. And then I graduated from grad school, started working as a intern towards my hours. About a year after that, I decided to get a doctorate degree because why not?
Well, go a little bit more in detail on that. What made you get your doctorate degree? Because you have your
Mhm.
master's, you can be licensed, you can do probably what you do today. So there was
Mhm.
something that made you say, doctor in my title could be beneficial. So what made you become a doctor?
Um, I think underlying is that just that passion to learn. I would go back to school now, and I've considered like going to law school, because I just love to learn new things. And what better way than in a traditional educational setting, right? But that I think that was probably underlying, and then just what the program had to offer. I looked into lots of doctorate degrees because I was already 1,000 hours in, of the 3,000. And if I were to do like a licensed clinical program, I would have to start my hours all over again. So I did a lot of research into like what this program would offer me. And based on like the coursework, I would be able to learn how to write grants, which would help me in the nonprofit sector. I learned they had courses on how to manage your private practice, which you do not learn in your master's program. They don't teach you that. I learned how to be a doctor in higher education. So, what it takes to be a therapist, but working in higher education, teaching other future clinicians what it's about. And they even offered an kind of like an internship, a fellowship program to then be eventually adjunct faculty, which I also went through, because, you know, if I'm gonna learn, I might as well be a professor and teach other people too. So that program, really enjoyed it. I would recommend the Chicago School of Professional Psychology to anyone who's interested in, you know, higher education, specifically in the field of psychology. They are like top tier in my opinion, and it's not just because I'm an alum.
Let's talk about the support that's needed to go through a master's program and a doctoral program. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, there is a legit financial concern. There's also lifestyle in the sense of there are some individuals you went to college with that have graduated and are working in the field while you're still studying, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
did both at the exact same time. So, talk a little bit about some of the sacrifices, some of the lifestyle things that goes with getting an advanced degree and a doctorate.
Yeah, well, you really have to have that as your priority because you will have to make lots of sacrifices. You won't be vacationing in New Mexico. You won't be going out for drinks every, you know, night with your friends or, you know, even pursuing romantic relationships. You have to figure out what you can devote your time to. And a program like any master's program, any doctoral program requires so much time and effort that, you know, you miss out on a lot of things, but you have to keep your eye on the prize of what you ultimately would like to accomplish. And looking back, I wouldn't change any of the sacrifices that I made. I can go out now.
Any advice to parents, because I think you're in a special situation to provide this advice to somebody who wants to get a doctorate? What type of support should they be providing? Like, you know, the experience, you know, the
Mhm.
support that you received, and you kind of know of what somebody's thinking through that process. So, how would you advise a parent helping a child through their doctoral program?
Oh, if I had to think, about what my mom did for me. She was my babysitter because in the middle of my doctorate, my dissertation, I gave birth. So she helped me so much with that, and just like encouragement. A lot of times, you know, when you're in the middle of a program, you have like imposter syndrome. You have self doubt that, you know, I can't, it's too much. I can't do it. There's no possible way. And just having people in your corner to say, like, I already know that you're going to finish it. I already believe that you're going to accomplish everything that you have set out to is like a little bit of extra gas in your tank when you don't have any to give yourself. So,
I like that. Now, during your counseling, as far as people counseling you about the career path and mental health, did they give you an advice on how much you would make? the type of income you could expect. Did you have any ideas of a lifestyle that you would live once you were able to practice? Kind of give me the
Mhm.
income thought as you were going through college and as you're a practitioner today.
Yeah, I think it was, they had the same, they compared it to life as a doctor, like a medical doctor, right? You go through, people really think that once a medical doctor is a doctor, like they're making 500K. No, residents make like maybe 30, 35. They make less than teachers and they have your lives. And it's different. Anyway, so, I really didn't have much of an expectation for like as I was going earning my hours, I knew I wasn't going to make any money. I think my average salary in California was maybe like 49,000, which I hope it's more today for them, because then you're still struggling. You can't have any kids. You can't do it. You can't have any other responsibilities, and be able to survive. But as you become licensed and you have more experience, the way that you will earn income is or a living is with a private practice. And you hope that you build that practice, you add people to your group, and you build a business from there. But they don't necessarily say that directly. They just say the path is private practice or to work, in nonprofit. Those are your options, really.
And if you were going to advise your younger self about the finances, what would you tell yourself to lessen the burden? You would probably still do the same thing, but what would you
Mhm.
tell yourself about what you're going to spend? We haven't talked about student loans yet, but student loans, income through those first years, how to survive, like
Mhm.
what's the kind of care plan package to your younger self?
Budgeting is really important, and I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
So if I had to give my younger self some advice, it would be to figure out a realistic budget, including everything that you think you're going to be spending, right? Because being a therapist is very stressful. So when you create a budget, you need to create a line item for self-care,
Mhm.
because if you don't include that, you're going to wind up, or at least I did, and I see that with a lot of my therapist friends, spending money to take care of yourself, and if you have not budgeted for that, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble, which you know we all tend to do sometimes. So
I love to ask therapists this question because I think it's different from the general population. How do you define self-care? What do you do? Because you take on a lot of the burden from your clients, similar to what I do. And you have to do things to unwind and repackage yourself for either the next meet in 15 minutes or even just to go to sleep. So what does
mhm.
self-care look like for you in this profession?
It's a lot of things that make me laugh, things that bring me joy, which can be it can be anything. I watch a lot of reality TV because it's like, wow, it's just entertainment. And it's almost like not mindless entertainment. I don't want to call it that, but it's something that you don't necessarily have to think about.
Mhm.
Like, if you were to watch an episode of The Crown, right? I'm watching that as well. So you have to pay attention to things like that to follow the plot. But for me, I like things where I can just kind of shut my brain off and just tune in. I watch a lot of like funny cat videos, just random things like that. I like to also explore like my creative side as well, just because um, that allows me to unwind as well. So lots of like DIYs, beauty. I like make press on nails for myself, and I just sit there and I do like, but it's artistic. So those are like kind of some of the things that I like to do. And me trying all of these different ways of taking care of myself allows me to give lots of recommendations for clients as well, because sometimes they don't know what to do.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that. Everybody is not equipped to go out on their own.
Nope.
Some people go out on their own because there isn't another option. Some people always had that drive to become an entrepreneur. Which category do you fit in, and kind of explain your thought process on becoming an entrepreneur?
Uh, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. Um, I think that if you have the passion for whatever product or service or thing, talent that you have to offer, that is what will drive your success. Because money will come eventually if your passion is there. Because if you are passionate about something and you don't know how to do it, you will either spend your time or dedicate your time learning it, or you will outsource it. You will find people who know how to do what you don't know how to do. If there's no passion there and you're just doing it just for the sake of doing it, there's not going to be as much effort, and effort net success. So that's what I would say on that.
I like that.
Entrepreneur. I'm
Yeah,
so stuck on that.
if you pay your own taxes, you are an entrepreneur. So, another question is, so explain your journey. So you're working, and all of a sudden you decide to form a company, file an LLC, take on clients. What was the step-by-step process that you used, and any aha moments along that process for yourself?
It was when I initially started my practice, it was always supposed to be a side hustle.
Hmm.
Um, because after doing over 3,000 hours, by the time I studied for my test and everything, you're still working, so you're still collecting hours. You're just like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of this. I want to do something else. But I knew that I enjoyed one-to-one client interaction. I just couldn't do it 40 hours a week. So as I started to look into like, what can I do as my main job and then have my practice on the side, I think that's where like it all started. It was just supposed to be a side thing. But as I've gone through my journey of navigating the nonprofit world, navigating the corporate world, I have found that the best way for me to feel successful in turn, that intrinsic success, not that someone else has given to me, is to create it on my own. Mm-hmm. And that's a scary thing. So you think about your clients who are taking this step of leaping into therapy, leaping into exploring themselves. Starting a business is a parallel process to that, because you have to believe that you got it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, your work and your progress is going to reflect that. You're going to get stuck a lot.
Mm-hmm. 100%. So how was it gaining your first clients? And I say your first clients after you completely went out on your own, because I think that's a different client. When you're working a job and somebody comes on, you're like, great. But when it's only your income is what I'm able to make and bring in, and you add on additional clients, like what type of validation was that for you? Like what type of emotions come when a client comes on board with your firm?
It's an amazing feeling, and I think that it's been a twofold process, because I started my practice through Talkspace, right? When I opened my practice, I was only a Talkspace provider, so my first client was via Talkspace. So it was like it was my client, but not really. Mm-hmm. So then, as I progressed to becoming credentialed with different insurance companies and really thinking about, oh my God, am I gonna rent an office? Am I gonna have a space that's my own, that I have keys to? I had keys. I said, oh my God. And to have a person that you built this and they walk in and then they leave feeling better, bro. Top, just the best. It's almost like having a baby. Like, you grew this baby and And now you get to see all of the things that they can accomplish.
Love it. Now let's go a little into the dirty part of entrepreneurship. So how did you find a leased place to lease? What is that process like? Because a lot of therapists are either remote or they don't have a dedicated space. So how was that process of finding a space? Well, even before that, what was your thinking of getting a space? Why do I need a space? And then the process of locking in a location for yourself.
Yeah, you talk a lot to your fellow clinicians. You talk to people who are ahead of the game. And that's where I learned like about places to find office spaces for rent. I want to say it was Craigslist is where I started looking for an office space. And I, went to a couple of offices and it was like, nah, I don't know. And then I was working with another clinician in a corporate setting, and she had her business, and she recommended an office. So that's really, networking is very important in this world, because you don't know everything, and Google's not going to tell you everything either.
I agree. I like that. I like the fact that you reached out to other people a little bit ahead and just said, "Hey, how did you do it? And what are some steps I should take?" And I think, a normal person would not think about Craigslist to lease office space. So I
Right.
think that's a really big golden nugget. So let's go into your specialty. And I think your
Mhm.
specialty is in trauma and really about the Black experience. Speak
Mhm.
on that on from a 1,000-foot level. Like, what is it that African Americans go through, individuals that are Black, when it comes to trauma? What are some of the consistent themes that are coming up in your office?
I would say the first thing that comes to my mind is it's invisible. And so society treats it like it doesn't exist, but it's like you're suffering in silence. And that when you're allowed to have a space that is safe, because the world is not safe,
Mhm,
right? That's what you've been taught.
mhm.
So when you come into this environment, right, this holding space that a therapist creates for you and says that you're not invisible, your pain is not invisible, I don't even know if I need to talk about anything else. Like that's all I needed was for somebody to see me and see that my pain is real. Yeah.
And go a little bit deeper, like explain some of the pain that we go through. Is it a pain dealing in a work environment? Is it a pain in everyday walking through society, feeling invisible? Elaborate
Mhm.
on the pain that we have to go through day in and day out.
Yeah, I think a lot that I come across in terms of day to day is like the microaggressions in the workplace. Um, it and it's almost like microaggressions coupled with gaslighting, because it's like you said something that's off, and I'm like, that feels off. No, no, that's not how you're. No, that was nothing. That wasn't anything. I didn't mean anything by it. My mom says that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I think that's the biggest thing that I come across. But then there's also the intergenerational trauma from adult children who were parented toughly, or who didn't have good parents, and it's a cycle of, well, this is how my mama did it,
Mhm.
this is how my grandmama did it, and it's almost like that some parents are able to recognize, yeah, I could have done better, but you turned out all right. So that's been a really big thing that a lot of new clients have been willing to explore, because you got to be willing to go there, um, to really kind of dig deep to like what happened in my childhood, how my mom talked to me, how my dad talked to me, how we all were interacting with each other was not the best. It wasn't an environment that would allow me to thrive.
What would you advise somebody who's young? Let's say a young individual of color wanting to go into corporate America, knowing that
Don't.
don't
Don't
what
do it.
don't elaborate. I like that. The honesty. Why is an individual of color going into corporate America not potentially not in their best interest long term?
Um, I saw something or I heard something the other day that was talking about like affirmative action and how these companies hire diverse hires only to make them feel like they don't belong. And I look at my experience as a clinician working for a probably billion-dollar company at this point,
Mhm.
how I felt so undervalued.
Mhm.
You will feel undervalued. You will not feel like they value you. They do not value you and what you have to offer. And so you have to decide, am I going to play this game to reach whatever goal? And what is the goal? To be the CEO? What's the goal? What's the goal? So it's been almost 5 years of me trying to navigate corporate as a doctor when no one else is a doctor, and no one else looks like me. And I'm trying to play the part of the docile clinician as to not be labeled.
I love that, and I want to go another step. So I really think it's like you mentioned, the goal. What is the goal at the end of the day? Is it to become that token person? Can you handle the microaggressions? Can you handle what you're going to go through being looked over for promotions, things of that nature? Speak on a little bit about what is the goal and how people can kind of shift the goal, because the goal is usually what we've seen in entertainment. That person who graduated from college gets a high paying job at a large company, and that's the definition of success. How should
Right.
these goals shift? And what does it take for that to shift?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to know your company. If I'm going to speak specifically about like navigating corporate, and so you have to know like where you could go, right, in a perfect situation, to figure out like what your goal is going to be. So to use myself as an example, right, I worked in the clinical department. So if I have a goal of promoting and moving up, I have to figure out, okay, what are the steps that I'm going to have to take in order to reach like VP of clinical, right? If that's my goal. And what exactly do I want to do in this position? Is it to run it the same way that everybody else has, or is it to enact change? But then I'm going to have that the whole way, and nobody wants things to change from the status quo.
Mm.
So it's almost like you got to play their game to go along with, in order to move up the ranks, because that's what you have to do. It's not about what you know. You could be the smartest person in the room, and if nobody likes you, so I think it's a real big game. It's a maze, is what corporate is. But you have to initially have a title goal in mind.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think that's important. So if you want this title, VP of XYZ, there's going to be sacrifices. Sacrifice of your time, sacrifice your family, sacrifice sometimes of your dignity. And you're going to probably do things that doesn't align with your values. Are you willing to cope with that? And then,
Mm-hmm.
but there are other options. I'm not sure if you want to speak to those. What are some other options besides the traditional going to the corporate role, that people may have to make other sacrifices financially that they go through? Can you speak on some of the other options that
Mm-hmm.
could be out there, or maybe some of your clients have experienced?
So if you choose not to, navigate corporate, and you're talking about in the mental health space,
Yes.
yeah, okay. I mean, you can go the nonprofit route, and learning how to write grants, and to be like a grant writer, that as a contractor, that could be your business. That's something that's extremely profitable, because there's so much money on these federal grant websites, and all you have to do is click boxes and figure out like what there's so much money on the table that you just have to figure out how you're going to go about attaining it, whether that be through writing grants, through nonprofit work in the community, or your private practice. And your idea is not just to be a solo practitioner, but to get your homies. Mm-hmm. And you all start, a group where you can split the overhead, and work with your friends and have consultation, and be able to be in an environment where you have that constant communication with people who are also in your field. Start your own.
All right, you mentioned the corporate space, but you also mentioned family dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
How parents have spoken to us growing up affects how we think about ourselves today and what we think and aspire to be. Speak on that a little bit more, as far as how should parents think about speaking to their kids, to prevent some of the things that you see in your office on a day in and day out basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some self-reflection is very paramount, and parents reevaluating the dynamic between a child and a parent. It's very easy to fall into, I'm the mom, you're the kid, you do what I say, and there's no talking about it. And what you've just done in saying that is you've stripped them completely of anything. And what do you think happens when they go out into the world? Do you feel like they're going to be more able to speak up for themselves because you just told them what they have to say is not valuable? So I think that shifting the perspective of like, these are little people, and what you say to them and what you pour into them is what's going to shape them. They only have their experiences with you. They're 5. They don't have other life experiences to say like, yeah, what my mom said was, it was a little crazy, but when I heard other experiences, it put it, I don't hold it with as much weight. What parents say to their young children holds so much weight. It shapes how they view the world, how they view themselves, and it takes so much undoing if they even ever get there, that they're fighting for the rest of their lives, overcoming what their parents told them when they were little.
It's amazing. And let's bring it full circle, because I feel like a lot of career goals and aspiration actually comes from the parents. Some of the expectation a child has about what I should be, what college I should go to, what degrees I should major in, are sometimes deposited in seeds from family members or different association. So if corporate could no longer be a goal for a child, what type of seed should parents potentially plant to allow the child to know that they have more options?
Showing them by example. If the parent has decided that corporate is not for them, well, what is for them? And I think that parents teach their children the most in their actions. So I think that's what has been my goal as a working mom, is that I'm going to show my daughter that I can do whatever I want. I can be anything that I want, and so can you. And it's not easy. I didn't say that I could do this like easily, but mommy's going to show you that if you work hard enough, if you're dedicated enough, eventually you will get where you want to go. And I think that's the biggest thing that parents can teach their children, is showing up healed and whole, or trying your best to get as close to that as possible, and showing them that process too, if you're not healed and whole.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think just being transparent, like if you go to a job that you don't like, don't make it seem like the best option. I think from my experience, my dad, he went out on his own, and though it was during my middle school years, which are very formative years, so I got to see that there are options and that you can
Hmm.
still survive not having a traditional job. So I really do like
Yeah.
that. So let's talk about some financial tips. You mentioned budgeting.
Okay.
Um, what are some, and you're speaking to your younger self about managing money. Let's say you've either
Hmm.
just worked your corporate job or you just stepped out on your own. What are some financial tips you would provide your younger self to say, I may have should have done this differently, or I knocked the ball, the cover off the ball on this idea?
Hmm. I think in terms of budgeting, being like, as a sole proprietor, right? Because in California, creating a business, you have to be a sole nonprofit or sole proprietor, essentially. So a lot of things get tangled, right? And when it's time to separate everything, it's so much more difficult to figure out what was a true business expense and what was just not, honestly. And so having that clearly divided, your business expenses, your business, like everything completely separate, even a separate account. If you can't do that straight away, have that to be like a short-term goal. Like within the next 3 months that I open my practice, I need to have a separate business account, because if everything is just going through your own personal things, because it can, you're going to be in so much more. You're going to be so much more stressed trying to separate it again. When it should just been separate from the beginning.
Who taught you that? Because you don't know what you don't know. Did you
Mm-hmm.
have a tax preparer help you out with this? Did you have to learn through trial and error? How did you know how to define what a business expense is? Even how to open up a business bank account? Because that is a process within itself.
Mm-hmm. Some of it I learned in my doctoral program. So I learned some of like the ins and outs of how to open specifically a therapy practice.
Mhm.
Um, but in terms of business, I think when I was first starting it, my stepmother was actually very helpful, because she had multiple LLCs. And so I went to her and I said, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help. What do I need to do? She's like, okay, go to this website, go to do this, make sure you have your EIN. Okay, all of these things that you create a list of things to do, and that's very important as well. Create a list of these are the things that I need to do to set up my practice. This is what I need to do to start getting referrals. This is what I need to do to build that, to start to promote myself. So you have to have kind of like checklists for every stage of the process, or you're going to feel like you're doing a million things and you're not making any progress.
You mentioned something, there's a consistent theme. You mentioned it when you were trying to find your lease, and you also mentioned it now as far as figuring out what is deductible as far as a business expense. You reached out to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You leaned on your network. Kind of speak on understanding when you're an entrepreneur, even when you're in the corporate world, you can't figure everything out on your own. So kind of speak to your younger self or a younger person who's watching this.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about reaching out to people for help? How did you get your head around that? How do you approach that aspect of it?
Yeah, I would say that for me, I use the same method that I use with my daughter, which is try it by yourself.
Yeah.
And if you can't figure it out, then ask me for help.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what I do in life. I try it by myself. I try Google. If Google does not, it doesn't make sense to me and I can't like conceptualize it from that, then I have to figure out who's in my circle that will know. And sometimes I call people and they're like, I don't know. Did you Google it? So it's also about like knowing who has that fund of knowledge,
Yeah.
uh, to be able to help you out. And a good resource as well is like, those Facebook groups that have like other professionals who are in your area. Those are actually very helpful. I learned a lot in my earlier days being in a therapy group on Facebook. Um, So you can do that. You can join your local professional organization, the chapter. So you have access to so many more resources. Like specifically CAMP, the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, they have legal, they have like business, they have just articles that you can pull to figure out like all these different things. So if you have not yet explored your professional organization in your area or joined, that's something that's going to be really helpful in providing with a lot of like tools and tricks and stuff.
I love it. I love it. So what is next for you? You have your practice now. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? What are some of the things that you're working on that you want to accomplish?
I would say stepping into the Dr. Danny brand uh, has really been the goal for 2024. Creating a concise person, because I can see now from just, you know, a few videos, I think I have like maybe 30 posts on Instagram that it's well received and I like sharing information. So if I'm going to do it, I might as well do it the correct way and have everything to be cohesive. If you see me on Instagram or TikTok and you are interested in things that I have to say, this is my website. This is all the other services that I offer. This is, you know, links to other areas that you might find beneficial. That's what my current project is creating a cohesive brand as a practitioner, as an educator. Just Dr. Danny.
Well, Dr. Danny, if people want to reach out to you, either to speak to you or learn you or even utilize your services, do you have a
Mm-hmm.
website you can share, a social media handle?
Mm-hmm. Best way or where you have all of the information because it has links to my website is my Instagram, which is Dr. like Dr. period DANI 2020. So Dr. Danny 2020. I have links to, you know, my website, my website has links to like if you're interested in scheduling an appointment and you're in California. So that's the best place to start currently. And everything's all set up there.
And last but not least, kind of speak to who is your ideal client that you would like to reach out and schedule an appointment with you.
Yeah. My ideal client is a motivated one who may not know what their goal is, may not know what they want to accomplish, but they're motivated to look inward. They're motivated to converse, to be challenged, and to like have a good time. Therapy is not all about like crying in tissues. I've had a lot of like aha moments where we're both just laughing. Most sessions, if the client is willing, we just like talk for the first 5 minutes. Did you watch the Super Bowl? What do you think about Beyonce's new country album? Like, you know, we talk about things that disarm you because you come into a session feeling like I'm about to cry, I'm about to, you know, dig deep, I'm about to go through all of these really intense things. And it's not always that way. Most times it's not. So
I love it. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Norma, for joining us with another episode of Building Wealth and Mental Health. I believe the
thank you for
information
having
you
me.
shared is awesome. Thank you very much.
Let's go, Uncle Money.